Hi, welcome to Behind Every Employer, a podcast that explores the intersection of workforce development and education and searches for solutions to a more talented, skilled, and productive workforce of the future. Join us as we chat with employers, educators, and students who want to join that mission. This podcast is being sponsored by the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. Now to our hosts, Anson Green and Jeffrey Abramowitz.
Hey, Jeffrey. How's it going, Jeffrey? Good to see you.
It's good to see you. How are you, Anson?
Hey, it's been a crazy week this week, and there's been so much activity going on. I wanted to tell you about some stuff I've been working on and get your feedback and hear what's up with you before we get to our guest. It seems like there's just been this convalescence, or not convalescence. It's just kind of like this cyclone of activity related to digital literacy in my life in the last week or two, and I'm so wonderfully positive about this because it is something so needed out there with our business community, and something that our adult education and community partners have been so focused on. But I think what's really brought this to the attention is that the federal government is putting out a lot of money into the Digital Equity Act, which is part of the infrastructure bill. And you put a lot of money out there on the street, and that's going to get a lot of interest in people. So I've been talking to business partners and community-based partners about these grants that are going to be coming to states over the next few years that are out there to build broadband infrastructure, so the wires and all the hardware, but also work on the equity side of digital education and digital access. And that's really that's our bailiwick. That's where we play. And so I'm so excited about this. I think I'm going to be talking about this, now for the next 3 or 4 years, because this has got a long runway of rollout. But it's great to see these grants that are coming out. States will be getting up to $125 million across the states for planning, and that's going to be starting pretty quick here. And then there's going to be competitive grants in the next years after that. So I'm just so excited about that kind of just excitement that the digital space is growing when it comes to equity in our communities. So, I mean, what's on your mind, and how do you feel about that?
So I couldn't agree more. I think digital literacy is so important, and we see so much happening in the federal level. So I'm excited because I actually had you on my radio and television show this week, and we were celebrating Career and Technical Education Week. And month, actually, it's the entire month of really understanding how we can do a better job in the career and technical education space. And it is really important because, part of our theme today is about upskilling and getting people that skill set's going to make them successful. And a lot of that is understanding the trades and what employers really need. So I'm really excited about our guest. I'm excited about what's going on in this area. Today was actually, this past few days, is the National Skills Coalition Conference that's going on virtually. Yep. So we've really been talking about this and digital literacy and skill development. So it leads into a perfect first episode for us at Behind Every Employer. Really looking forward to it.
I agree. And National Skills Coalition is really one of the leaders when it comes to publishing on the digital literacy aspect of things. And I want to get into our guest and tell you a little bit about her. So it's our first episode, and I couldn't really think of a better person to have online for me personally, but really for the episode too, because she's just got such an expansive vision of education and really that frontline focus on education. So let me tell you about our guest here. Her name's Jacque Burandt, and she's a leading healthcare educator in the United States, working largely for a large part of her career at University Health in San Antonio. So she's San Antonio, just like I am, and that brings it even closer to my heart. But for 30 years, Jacque has been involved in really comprehensively working on models at a very, very large South Texas hospital system, going from frontline orderlies all the way up to the expert level practitioners in this hospital system. And I was really struck by Jacque early on, and I'm going to ask her in a little bit how far back we actually go. But I was really struck because one thing about Jacque that stands out in my mind is she's got comes from the business sector, but she has a very strong focus when it comes to engagement with the community, engagement with public sector partners, and a big engagement with adult education, which is where our paths have crossed. She's also really involved now with ATD, the Association for Talent Development, and really bringing her work to a national level. She recently retired out of the university health system and has her own business, which I want to hear more about from her. And she's really out there sharing her message. I was actually on a podcast with her earlier this week and was just really, really excited to kind of hear her perspective to that audience. But one thing about Jacque that I think the audience today and our listeners are going to enjoy is that she has deep roots in the world of adult education. And I think that's where this public sector embrace comes from with her. She started way back, and we'll hear about her history here as a volunteer literacy tutor, an administrator. And then when she was at University Health, where I met her, she was doing workplace ESL classes for her staff and really taught me a lot of the ropes when it comes to business engagement. She does, come back to the digital literacy piece too today. And I want to talk to her about that because she was very, very involved in the really massive rollout of a large digital system at University Health System. So I want to talk to her about that. And she's actually published about that in a new handbook, the Talent Development and Training Handbook, that she's going to tell us a little bit more about today that recently came out. I got a copy of it. And the one thing I like about the handbook is that it's something that, even though it's healthcare related, I'm in the manufacturing sector, man, there's lessons learned there all over the place for all of us. So we're going to hear about her chapter on upskilling and reskilling and really hear how that public sector nonprofit focus weaves in and out of that work.
I'm Jacque Burandt, and I'm the president of Award-Winning Results. I have a company that works to empower people and organizations to be their very best and then to gain recognition for their great work. I've been very fortunate to have worked in both healthcare and adult education. Having been an adult educator, I always have the student in mind as the goal. How are we going to reach that student? And we reach them through the teachers to a great extent. And these standards are another tool for the teachers to use. Wonderful thing about healthcare is there are so many openings. Some people think that it's just nurses and doctors, but there's a huge team of people that support that direct patient care, and many of those are entry-level positions. So many departments in healthcare that support patient care. It could be phlebotomy, it could be lab, it could be a nurse aide, a home health aide, physical therapy assistant, many people who contribute to the overall well-being of the patient. A person working on the phone, the coders who do the medical coding work mostly by phone now. So there's just a great variety of options in healthcare. Healthcare is a very interesting field because it's an interesting combination of the people skills and the technical skills or scientific skills. It's really good if we can find someone who has great people skills, and then usually we can take them and train them into the specific area that they want to go in, whether it's laboratory or phlebotomy or something like that. But to have those great people skills, that's really number one thing in healthcare. I really don't think there's a job in healthcare today that's not desperately needed. They're all so important, and healthcare has proliferated from large institutions like hospitals into much smaller, more community extended, and we see much more going out to the patient in something like a home health aide. But then there's also the ability to work in so many different kinds of environments. You can be in a huge health center, you could be in as a lonely home health aide, you could be in a smaller public health facility, an ambulatory clinic. So many unexpected things can happen in healthcare. It's a person, it's a body, anything can happen, so you can't just necessarily follow a protocol. You have to be able to think on your feet and to have those good problem-solving skills. Healthcare is wide open for career paths. It is great. That's one of the things we've had the most success with, is getting people on the ground floor. I mean, literally, refugees who speak no English, getting them into ESL, getting them into GED, putting them through some programs, and then seeing them progress all the way up to medical surgical technicians. There's tuition reimbursement, continuing education reimbursement, certification reimbursement. So someone can come in on the ground floor with just that willingness to want to learn and can be around other people and aspire to those higher positions.
So with that, let's bring in our guest, Jacque, and see where she comes from on some of these perspectives.
Hey, Jacque, how are you?
Hey, does my head still fit on the screen? This intro has kind of made my head kind of big, so I just want to make sure. Thank you.
You've had a big, you've had a big impact on me, Jacque, and a big impact on really hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people. You know, your name is out there, not just in San Antonio, but all over the place. So thanks for joining us today, Jacque. I really just could, like I said, I could not think of a better person to chat with on our first podcast. You and I really go back. And my first question is, I was kind of putting things together for the podcast, and I was like, when did we first meet, and what was that context? Because, you know, it's these relationships that continue through multiple jobs, through multiple dynamic, you know, new things that we're pursuing in our careers. But we come back and we find each other. But where does that origin story lie with us? I can't even remember.
So I can remember it vividly. I remember some crazy things like what you were wearing, maybe. But no, seriously, other things are completely gone from. I don't have a lot of disk space left, but I remember some things. It's kind of random access. No, I remember the setting perfectly. We were in the sub-level classroom right by the emergency center, level 1 trauma center, all kinds of chaos going right outside our door, hoi polloi of people everywhere. And we were holding class the best we could in our little sub-level classroom, which frankly was never that great. But, you know, to be honest, learning and development doesn't always get the greatest rooms. We kind of take what we can get. Space is at a premium in a hospital. They're not going to give up, you know, classrooms if they can put something else in there that's revenue producing. So we were in the sub-level classroom. You were with Alamo Colleges, and we had a grant through you. We worked with you to bring in ESL and ESL classes. And we had a great partnership at university, speaking of great partnerships, with Catholic Charities of San Antonio. And Catholic Charities is big here. And the refugee program, full disclosure, I'm one of its main fans, and I'm a mentor with the refugee youth program, and I used to be chair of their gala, and I've just always had a soft spot for them. So we at university were the job placement arm for these folks who had just come over. It was a wonderful thing because we would see waves wherever there was turmoil in the world. Then we would get a wave starting with Vietnam and going all the way through to the present. I think there were 16 different languages in the environmental services department the last time I heard. So with the influx of these folks, the first thing we wanted to do was to upskill them so that they could do a better job. And a lot of that upskilling, of course, had to do with communication, specifically with language, which has a lot to do with patient safety, which is paramount. So that was the first place that we met.
Wow, man! I'll tell you what, that's some serious memory there, and I'm going to have to pick your brain about what I was wearing that day.
Okay.
Very, very intriguing. But you really just jumped into where I want to talk a large part today. We found this way to collaborate, with me at Alamo Colleges first, and me working at the state of Texas. And so it's always been this public sector, face for me until recently. But I want to get a little bit of history on how you kind of this origin story of where did Jacque come from that really found yourself saying, when we're going to engage with these communities, we need to engage with our community-based partners and our public partners. Because, a lot of businesses get very insular when it comes to things like workforce development, and they kind of want to build everything inside. I always see you as somebody like saying, let's go out, let's go out, let's go out. Tell me a little bit about your history. How did you, maybe some of that gives us a clue about how you built that into your DNA there.
Well, thanks for asking. I was just at the Smithsonian Portrait Gallery, and I wanted to see the president's portraits, and I stopped by LBJ's. And this is not a political statement, it's a personal statement. And I said a small thank you to him because he when he was president with the War on Poverty, the Great Society, and the Neighborhood Youth Corps, I was able to get my first upskilling because I got a summer job through that program, and no more hanging out at the pool, chasing guys or whatever we did when we were teens. I had to get up every morning. I had to dress appropriately. I had to learn about all of the ins and outs of working in a real work environment from 8 to 5, 40 hours a week. I was so fortunate. I was in an air-conditioned office at City Hall in Denton, Texas. My job was entering the cemetery records, which were on some, ancient archive parchment or something, but I got my typing up, which actually helped me in college because we had so many papers to do. And I had a wonderful, I learned about mentors. The woman who was our mentor typed 120 words a minute. She was amazing. I learned about record keeping, so many things. So that was my first experience with upskilling. I went on, throughout my career. When I was in school, I was a work studies student, working my way through. Then after I graduated with my degree from UT Austin in TV film, I couldn't find a job back then. And so I just had a regular office job. And then in the evening, I would volunteer at Becker Community School in South Austin near my house. And that was my first brush with adult learners in adult basic education, GED, ESL. We did it all, prepared them for citizenship. It was the most gratifying job I think I still have ever had. And then I had a volunteer position. It was just 2 nights a week. Then they upped it to 4. Then the instructor quit. And so then I quit my day job and worked for Austin Community College. So that's my link to community college systems and knowing the great work that they did. I worked with them until time to get my master's degree. And I had so much love, embrace is the perfect term that you used, Anson, that I decided to get my master's in adult and continuing ed from UT Austin. So that's what I did. And then my husband got his MBA. So we had to move to San Angelo, 4 hours away. And I had to I got on a Greyhound bus every morning at 5:30 to get to Austin to go to classes all week. I had this junk car that I kept here so that I could get around. And I slept on my friend's couch, and then every Wednesday night at midnight, I would roll back into the Greyhound bus station and then be there. So I did that for like 9 months until I got my master's degree, and so that was a great experience too. I felt like I worked for it in a way. And then I decided I learned about corporate. There was this other kind of adult education in a corporate environment. And that was, like the 80s, and corporate was big. So I like to say, and Anson, you can probably identify, I went corporate. And so, but I had all of that knowledge with me of the opportunities that are out there in the community. So I tried to bring that into university. And to be honest, university isn't very corporate, because they're the community hospital. But I was on the other side, I was the employer now, wearing a different hat. It was interesting, but it was great because I could tell our CEO and the VP of HR and everyone, I could say, hey, I know we don't have any money here. We're taxpayer supported. We're stewards of the budget of the community. Everything we spend, they need to know about, rightfully so. So we don't have budget for this, but we can make it work. We can stretch it on a shoestring by working with these organizations that do have grants and things like that. So I've gone on a bit, but that's kind of in a nutshell.
I love that. It's a great journey. And I mean, you've got that's your career pathway yourself, which shows the roots there.
And it's so rare, Anson. It's so rare. You wish that everyone had wear those glasses, right? If you could just wear those corporate glasses and both the private and public sector glasses, you have those. You have the vision of what students go through, those challenges that they travel through that journey to get not only their ESL but to go and get that skill development and certifications and move forward in their career. And oftentimes employers just don't see it. But when you lived it and you walk both sides of it, that's pretty remarkable. Awesome.
It is, and it helps. I mean, it gives you that perspective. Also, just what it takes to upskill. When you go down, into the lower skilled workers in a workforce there, and that really proves out in an industry like healthcare, where you really have a large allied health workforce and so much support staff in the hospitals there. So I want to pivot and talk about your new publication a little bit. So this is a wonderful handbook, and I was fortunate to get a copy of it. And a message I said at the beginning, and I want to say it again. If you're listening and you're an employer and you think like, okay, I'm not in healthcare, so this has nothing to do with me. It's so untrue in that there's so much transferable knowledge here for other sectors. It's the first thing that jumped out at me. I'm in manufacturing. I read it not just because Jackie's got stuff in there, but because these titles intrigued me. The upskill, we're going to talk about your upskilling and reskilling component in there. But tell us a little about the publisher, ATD. I know you're very involved with them briefly. And then let's talk about the handbook a little bit and what gap you were trying to fill in the literature on talent development in the healthcare world.
Okay, so ATD, Association for Talent Development, used to be known as ASTD, Association for American Society for Training and Development. I've forgotten their old name. We've done such a good job of rebranding. And they've been around for, I think, 80 years now. And they're a huge organization. And I'm going to read you exactly what they say. Our members and customers are professionals who help others achieve their full potential by improving their knowledge, skills, and abilities in the workplace. They go by many titles: talent development managers, trainers. That's probably what most people know us by. Instructional designers, performance consultants, etc. There's 28,000 members right now from more than 120 countries. They work in organizations of all sizes and all industry sectors. So that's their sort of description. I would just say that I think their tagline says it best. They're making a world that works better. So it's all about making the workplace better. And it's a great organization. I have been involved with them for many, many years now and continue to be more involved with them. They're great at evolving. And I always say, if there's a new idea, a new concept, what's on the horizon, I learned it there. I learned it from ATD.
That's great. Well, that's fantastic. Well, I want to ask you about the Reskilling Upskilling chapter. And first, I'm going to tee something up to Jeff real quick. I love it when we can kind of parse the areas of training and education that we're talking about more distinctly, because there's a lot of nuance in the work we do. But Jeff, had you ever heard or made this distinction between reskilling and upskilling, or is it just me that's new to?
No, it's really new to me. And I became a little bit aware of it from discussions that have happened over the last year, but it's really a nuance.
Yeah.
When you think about it, I mean, we always talk about upskilling and,
yes,
and taking people, but reskilling is something that is becoming more and more important, especially in light of COVID and what's happened in our labor market today. That reskilling piece of actually taking people that have been in the workforce maybe for decades that are now pivoting and reskilling them, not even upskilling, just reskilling them, retooling them into professions where they're high priority industry sectors. So I'm really interested in hearing Jackie's slant on this and how she addressed it in her book.
Absolutely. So it's a handbook. So Jackie gave us some really nice definitions. That's what I love about the handbook. It's a practitioner book. But Jackie, for our listeners, tell us the distinctions there in reskilling and upskilling, because I really put some Post-it notes around these pages so I could really get this into my mind. So tell us about this.
And a lot of people use it sort of synonymously.
Yes.
And so don't get too hung up on reskilling, upskilling. I'm glad to provide the definition, but you won't necessarily see it always used exactly correctly. So reskilling, the way you can remember this, the mnemonic is that it's new, renew. So you're going to get a whole new job. It's not your old job. It's a whole new job. So this happens quite a bit, more and more in this volatile, uncertain, chaotic, complex, ambiguous VUCA environment that we live in right now. A whole occupational code can just be wiped out very quickly. And so I know that, for example, CNAs or certified nursing assistants that we worked on, Anson, quite a bit with you.
Yep.
That job category doesn't even exist at university. That's a nursing home kind of job for the most part. So sometimes we would use that to help an environmental service worker get some clinical skills so that they could go over that skills gap into a new job at the hospital. So reskilling means it's a whole new job. They did away with medical assistants, so now you're going to have to become a coding specialist or something like that. So that's reskilling. Renew is how to remember that one.
I like that.
And then upskilling, you're still in your job, and it's beyond the normal training and development that you get annually or however. It's way beyond that. It's a whole new skill set, such as digital literacy, that would even something, a typical soft skill, such as emotional intelligence or diversity, equity, inclusion we were talking about earlier. Any of these can be examples of upskilling in a current job.
Excellent. Great response. And I mean, I think for our listeners, there are industries for sure. And healthcare is a great example. I'm in manufacturing. We see, quite a bit of evolution in some of these jobs. And I like that you even brought it down to like whole occupational codes kind of, becoming redefined or sunsetted. That is something for training and HR managers, they've got to really keep a pulse on because you've got to stay current with the times in terms of where the industries are. I'm glad you brought up the CNA because, I think it was working with you when I was back at Alamo College's district that I really started to notice, we trained a lot of CNAs, but I noticed depending on the customer that we were training for, whether it was long-term care or university or another hospital, they were really viewing that position differently. And they were looking for different aspects of those skills. And that really helped me start to parse out like how one job, CNA, you think of that as kind of a standardized thing, very different when you get to different work contexts. So really appreciate that clarification there. And I'm going to really work that into my vocabulary. And I like your mnemonic device there really is going to help me because that's where I get stuck, honestly. So I was struck, as I was reading the case studies, I was really struck by, as we opened up with the public-private partnerships. And in your chapter, you talk about your really compelling examples working with the local Workforce Development Board, Workforce Solutions Alamo, who I believe you used to sit on, right?
Yes, I was on the board until I retired.
You were on the board, I think, right after I left there, actually. And then a very powerful kind of a San Antonio institution, Project Quest, a big nonprofit in San Antonio. And then something near and dear to my heart, which we opened up with, which is the Bibliotech, which is San Antonio's first all digital public library, really the first digital library in the United States.
Yes.
So these partnerships really helped you identify funding opportunities, but tell us a little bit more about you've got, to build those partnerships, that takes time.
Yes.
And that's what I hear businesses say, like, wow, that coalition building doesn't come cheap when it comes to time of day. Like, I got to go out there and meet and do all this. Why don't we just do it all internally? So tell me your thought process, maybe when you're advocating with your bosses, like, hey, I'm going to go, beat the streets and talk to a bunch of community-based organizations and adult educators about working with us at university. Like, how do you make that case? Tell us a little bit more about how that evolved in this context with your San Antonio partnerships.
Well, for one thing, I was very fortunate in that we are, part of the community. And so it wasn't a hard sell. I'll be perfectly honest.
Yep.
Our CEO is well known in the community. In fact, when working with Project Quest, it was funny because it's run by, I think, I can't remember her first name, Sister Veronica or something. She's a nun, and she met our CEO at some luncheon for the city, and she was talking to him about the partnership that we had, and she said, "I want to meet Jackie." Which is funny because I had never actually met with her personally, but believe me, that upped my stock a bit with the program stock with the CEO. So we're in the community. That helped. Wasn't a hard sell. The other thing is that it's just a win-win. It's a no-brainer. It makes every sense in the world because it does stretch your budget. We saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in our tuition reimbursement fund because people got their college educations free. So they didn't have to draw upon our fund. So that was something that I was always tracking and putting in a dashboard and pointing out in my reports on these programs. And so it just gives you those resources you don't have, especially in a public hospital set, taxpayer supported, but I think anywhere now. It's not just that. No one has those resources anymore. And so why would anybody turn down free training? It makes no sense to me. But you're right about the time and the commitment. Yep. And that's the one thing that you have to realize. One way or another, you're going to have to pay for this. But if you don't have budget to just shell out, then it's going to be time and commitment. A designated staff member, someone who has to be the organization's voice with this group and support them, because they're going to need all sorts of things. You're going to need a very strong internal partnership at your organization with IT. You've got to be sure you've got the computer setups, the laptops. You're going to have a partnership with HR. Right. They sometimes help you identify who are the candidates. Many of these grants have pretty rigid specifications about who can and can't partake in it. So you've got IT, you've got HR, you've got corporate communications. You're going to have to do a publicity blitz to let everybody know about this is coming up, when and where. You've got to have your strong relationships with the managers who are going to help get the word to these people. I mean, it is a commitment. And even if you're getting free training, you're still in a way paying. You've got skin in the game because you've got to be that partner. It's really it's the ultimate partnership, and to me, the ultimate win-win. Everybody wins. That saying about a rising tide lifts all boats, and I think that's true in terms of the economic imperative. Is there anybody who doesn't want their community to be a stronger, more prosperous community? This is the way to do it, ending intergenerational poverty. That's Alamo College's promise now. Right. And that's the key, I think, to getting where we want to be. So it's definitely economic. But the one thing I would say about the rising tide lifts all boats that I heard somebody say one time was, yeah, that's great if you've got a boat, And so I think that part of what we do is we're giving them a boat, or maybe we're giving them oars or propeller, whatever, but we're helping them. So it's a good for everybody.
Yeah, Jeff, I want to bring you into this. I can tell you.
So it's a place that I live because I believe that it takes a village. Like, we can't do this alone, and we're finally beginning to understand that employers and public resources like educators and skill training programs and ESL programs, we all have to work together. And what's happening right now in our labor market is that we have all these jobs that are coming down. Anson mentioned earlier about, the money that's going to come down from the federal government for infrastructure. We know it's coming, right? But if we don't prepare our workforce for those jobs, the people that really need them the most, that can be pulled out of poverty from them, are the ones that may not get them because they don't have the skill development and talent and that education to get there. And that's why the work that you do is so important, Jacque, and the fact that you love that collaboration and it's so central to the work you do is really incredible. And it should be something that should be a model for every corporation across the country.
Yeah, I'll just say a few words about that too. That's why I went to Tyson Foods. They had the same kind of commitment of integrating with the local community public systems, and there's so much durability in those models. They take work on the front end. I have a team that does the heavy lifting on the partnership and coalition building. But when we leave, that relationship is there locally, with the school, the college, the community-based organizations. So, but it's so funny. You have like the tale of two cities here, because you have the businesses that think that way, which I think are in a minority. And then you have I work with so many businesses. You have on the other end of the spectrum, businesses that don't know those systems exist, or they know very little about them. They may know the community college, but they don't know who to talk to or how to get in. But they don't know about adult education. They don't know they can find English as a second language classes at no cost that can be brought into their establishments and things like that. So I think there's, with behind every employer, that's one of the things we really want to do is really build this awareness that there's a whole system that's eager to work with businesses in your backyard. And that's something, you have from your DNA, working in adult education back in Austin back in your graduate days. You brought that with you, but we need to really bring that message to our businesses. I want to talk a little bit here about the digital literacy part of that story and the electronic health records migration. I found that fascinating. A massive hospital system. I always think of university as, the hospital that has all the helicopters. You can measure the size of a hospital system by their numbers of helicopters. But really, I can't imagine somebody coming up and saying we're going to migrate to, this system here for electronic health records. Go train, Jacque. Go take this on. Tell us how you did that and how you brought in the bibliotech and the community-based components to this. It's exciting.
Well, we had a lot of help, of course, from Epic, the electronic health record people. They had a training group on site for years. They had certain people, assigned to us, and they're well known. They're in almost every health system. So, but it was a strategic plan. If you can imagine flipping the switch over to the new system and what that felt like. But it was a multi-year plan, actually kind of similar to what we did when we built the trauma tower. And we had to literally flip the switch from going from the old hospital over to the new. So we had a lot of experience in large change events like this and what it took, although they were somewhat different. There were similarities because the equipment, when we moved and we had to come into all new equipment, so everyone had to be trained on the floor plan of the new building and the equipment in the new building. And the same thing was true of Epic. So literally the electronic health record is the heart of any healthcare organization. Sure. Everything ties into that, and everyone ties into that. And there's all sorts of apps and a million different software packages on there and things that, the pharmacy and everything that ties into there. So we had to do this massive training plan along with Epic of who needed to know what when. And they led us. I'll be perfectly honest. They were the experts, having done this before. So they led us. We also sent a large group of people up to Wisconsin, which Madison, or somewhere near Madison is their headquarters. So we sent a bunch of people up there to come back and be trained the trainers. That was a big part of it. But as we went through it, we discovered a lot of digital illiteracy in our staff that otherwise we probably wouldn't have known, but because it was suddenly a requirement for 10,000 plus employees to be upskilled in this, it became very apparent very fast. So we really had to zero in on those folks who didn't know. And it was two extreme groups: the physicians who were just kind of too busy to know this kind of thing, certainly too busy to leave and go to class. And then the entry-level folks, the environmental service workers who had not had to use any kind of literacy before. All of this also played forward with COVID because through a crazy, the usual craziness of the world, were just in the middle of the epic transition when COVID hit. So all of the plans that I taught many live classes right up until the 1st of March that year in 2020. And I was mainly working, teaching our managers and people how to be coaches so that they could coach their employees. And then bam, COVID hit, and all of the training plans that we had to do live training on the equipment, in the IT center, in the lab, which you got to have, all went away.
Wow.
So we had to flip to take COVID, everything that entailed, which was, you can imagine, massive. And then at the same time, we couldn't stop the transition to Epic. So all of that training had to go on, but it had to go on virtually. And, virtual, we're doing it right now.
Yeah.
And I understand that, it can work, but there are certain things that it's not ideal for. And this happened to be one of them. So nonetheless, we did it. But the vast majority of the training completions, I think around 225,000 different units that were completed. But in doing that, the one thing I do want to just talk about is the elbow training. And this is something that happens a lot in healthcare, primarily with physicians, because you have to go up to them when you can get them and literally sit at their elbow to work with them one-on-one. And we found that same model worked really well with the environmental service workers who had language issues, who were struggling with digital literacy. And then we brought in our bibliotech, once again, the free library. Bibliotech has lynda.com and I think LinkedIn Learning, and you have access to English. You have access to, how to do Microsoft. Everything is out. The world really is out there in bibliotech and free. And we had even though you can access it from anywhere, most of these folks didn't have computers. So we had a setup at the hospital so that anyone could go there and use it too. So that turned out to be a great resource for us.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll put the link to the Bibliotech website there for our listeners. Fantastic. I've been to the Southside one, which I think was the first one.
Mm-hmm.
The online libraries, it's just like not a book in the place, but everything technology. Fantastic. So we want to kind of turn the corner here. And Jeff, did you want to chime in here on any of that?
No, it's just amazing. And I think that, you see the challenges from your perch where you sit, and I say, oh my gosh, I'm working with a lot of people that are marginalized populations that have a hard time understanding what a mouse is. And, that training component is so beyond them that you really need to sit down elbow to elbow with them and really work them through it. So you really hit home with some of that, with that piece of it in particular. So I so appreciate that. There's definitely so much more that to this whole picture. But the scale that you do it on is remarkable, especially in the healthcare sector. And it's something that, as we're trying to get, I know that there's going to be a demand over the next few years for healthcare workers. And I want to encourage people out there that they really should be looking at the healthcare sector. It's so rewarding, and there are amazing employers out there like your company that really are willing to dedicate time and effort to help people get those skills to be successful. So I really want to encourage all of our listeners, if you know people that are interested at all or have had that passion in their belly that want to get into healthcare, that now is really an amazing time to do it.
Absolutely. One thing I was going to say too, I found it almost a harrowing story to hear you talk about doing this, the pivot during the pandemic, for the adult education and the colleges and the education sectors. That was a harrowing event. But you're a hospital also doing this as the front line of the pandemic, and making that transition at the same time just seems like the most daunting thing I could imagine. So kudos to you and the team for persevering. I mean, my gosh.
Mostly kudos to I would say to universities administration, because while other people were laying off, and they talked about that in today's webinar, many hospitals, were letting people go. They made a commitment at university that they would not do that. So they upskilled, or in some cases reskilled, because nobody was going to the ambulatory clinics at that time. They were too scared. So bring all those people in. We need people to take temperatures, to do that screening in the front lobby. So we just shuffled everybody around, and no jobs were lost.
Wow, great.
Fantastic.
That was upskilling and reskilling.
Wow, what a testament. And then you bring this to your new venture, award-winning results, and I want to hear a little bit about that to close here. But I have one last question for you, and it has to do with some tips for our listeners. We draw kind of an employer audience and an adult education audience. What are some tips you can share related to these collaborative, alliances and these relationships? What are some tips you can share to make these things most effective, for folks that are venturing out into this world of collaboration?
Well, I'm not going to say anything revolutionary or, this is old news, but it's true. It's all about the relationships.
Yeah.
It's all about the relationships. And network, the second part of that compound word is work. And so if you want to reap the benefits, free training, a greater economy, everyone uplifted, you have to work at it, and you've got to maintain those relationships. And lots of that it's not going to show immediately. You're going to spend time doing this and cultivating these relationships. But in the end, it's always going to pay off. So you're there when your partner needs help. You're there, and vice versa. So my best advice to everyone is just think about the relationships. Who's in your network? Don't get your circle so narrow that it's just you're insular to your field or your organization. You've got to get out there. And I know, it's been hard to get out there because there's nowhere to go, but you've got to know your community, know your community colleges. I mean, look it up on Google right now. See, where is your local, what is your local community college doing? Look up your workforce board. Their meetings are open to the public. You can go to those. Look at faith-based organizations. I mentioned Catholic Charities. We mentioned Project Quest started out as a faith-based organization. Grants, look within your own organization. You've got a grants person. Usually, most organizations do. Let them know that what you're looking for. There's so many avenues to pursue, and some of them are dead ends, or some of them aren't a good match. And so you just have to persevere and just get out there, meet people, be curious, have something to offer them. As the employer, I felt like we had classrooms. They weren't the greatest. We could offer some snacks. We could offer parking, wasn't always the greatest either. But you have to think about, what are you as the employer going to offer to this partnership? And I just get out there. It'll be my best advice. Get started. Feel that commitment. This is an imperative. Right now, the Great Resignation we talked about so much, and anti-ambition I read in the New York Times today is a new term. So it's a great time to develop your organization from within. Nobody knows your culture better than the people who are already there.
So true.
They get it, and they want to stay with you. They need that lifting, and it just makes perfect sense. You don't have to go out and spend big money on recruiting, finding a new person, getting them up to speed. To me, it's just the most obvious thing in the whole wide world to build your own pipeline from within. And you've got somebody ready to step right in to the next. The other thing I would say about relationships is that once you get a program going, so important to maintain those internal relationships that we talked about earlier, particularly with the executives. You want to invite them to your celebration. You want them to speak. You want them to visibly see, oh my God, look at all these people and their families, because they always brought their families to our celebrations. And it's just part of your job to sell it and to make that business case. Have your stats ready. You've got to always say, this is how many people we had, this is how many graduated, these are how many people got promoted, these are how many people got awards and recognitions, retention, this person's been with us for 10 years, net promoter score, what do people say about us in the employee engagement, when you enter best workplaces, and they always have those questions about, would you recommend this hospital? And I would see it all the time, because when I was doing new employee onboarding, I would see someone who came back, who had left us, and then they went somewhere else, and then they came back, and I would say, wow, what have you been up to, and what are you doing? And they would always tell me, wherever I was, they didn't have that investment in me as a person. Yeah. Maybe I made a little bit more money, but the total package of my rewards didn't include significant investment in my growth. So I used to see that all the time.
Good stuff. Great stuff.
The fantastic lessons there, Jackie. I think back, with my work, I always tell my team, even though, on the face we seem like adult educators at our business, that we're really alliance brokers. We're really, we go in really building the partnership and making both pieces of it work well together. And that seems to be your calling there, and doing such a great job there. Thanks so much. This has been an illuminating discussion. Jeff, I think we can agree, man, we've learned a lot here. For sure, we're going to bring you back, Jackie. There's a lot more to talk about with what you're doing that we just dipped our toes into this discussion. So now,
thank you so much. I'm honored to be the first guest.
There you go.
And I did want to just very briefly plug the book to say, because we had a lot to talk about, and there's so much more in the book. And so, and it is a handbook, so you can just read one chapter. You don't have to read the part that doesn't apply to you, but there's all kinds of great case studies. There's job aids, there's checklists, there's follow these steps. It's in the book. So if you want to know more, feel free to check it out. Maybe it's even in Bibliotech. You can get it.
We'll put it on the website as well.
Okay.
So
we will. And again, it's healthcare, but I want to stress again, and you were saying this about like broadening your horizons. Businesses often kind of work in their silo. I'm in manufacturing, I'm in healthcare, I'm in IT. There's a lot to learn by going cross-sector. And I think that book is a great example of what you can get out of it and lift out of it. There's a chapter I'm just dying to read by one of your guests that was on the webinar I watched earlier that is really just understanding the frontline workforce. And that's what this is all about. So thanks again, Jackie.
Jackie, thank you so much. And so we're going to be right back with the lightning round. And you can't miss this. This is how we're going to wrap up every show. So we'll be right back behind every employer.
All right.
are back. Anson, this is a lightning round. So this is something that you and I thought about, and we really wanted to leave people thinking about something when they left the show. And every week when we do this, a podcast, or every 2 weeks when we do it, we're going to be sharing something that's on our mind. And I want to lead off today because I'm really excited about what my share is. It happened yesterday, and it happened in a convenience store in Philadelphia. And there were 3 young men that were standing at the counter, and they had their arms pretty loaded with food. And it was clear that they all had book bags and they were headed to school, and they were kind of looking and fumbling around for how they were going to pay for it all. And stepped in, and I asked them, I said, you guys going to school? And they said, yeah, we're on our way. And I got you today. And I picked up their lunch bill. And the act of picking up the lunch bill wasn't what was important to me. It was, I last night was able to post, and I posted because I wanted people across the country to start recognizing that when young people are in store and they're getting some nutrition for the day, it's going to help them get smarter, and that we should be investing in them. And it was so small, but it was such a small little gesture, but it was something that was really important. And it was even more important when the message I wanted to send was to the convenience store, which is a national big chain. And I wanted them to step up and say, you know what? We're going to provide free student lunches 1 day a week, or we're going to give a student discount. And I think we all have to start investing in our young people to help take away some of those challenges that they have and help them get smarter. So when they enter that workforce, they're ready to go. I mean, they are our future. So I was really excited about it. It did go viral today. I was really excited about it. I had thousands and thousands of people were looking at it, and they were saying, yeah, I need to do that. That's a pretty good idea. It only cost me a few bucks, buy some young person their lunch. And so my message today is, next time you're in the convenience store, look at the people around you. If one of them's a student, think about it. Think about it. So there you go. Anson, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, my lightning round kind of is on another dimension of these things. And it kind of sunk in yesterday, and it ties back to what we heard from Jackie today about the alliances and stuff with, your public partners. So one of the things I do at Tyson Foods is work on bringing in money and bringing in grants to work with our community-based and adult education partners across the states that we do our work in. I had this one instance about a month ago in Nebraska, and then yesterday it came home to roost for me here in Texas. But it was a partnership I was putting together for a grant, and it was with another business. So we were going to join together on this grant and hopefully bring some money into the college that would serve both of our businesses. In Nebraska, we were working together, and the business said, I was kind of saying, well, how do y'all want to do this? And they said, well, we just want to replicate what you're doing at Tyson because you've already got an established model. And, we're new at this. We're eager to kind of get into this public sector work to do training in our hospital. And, I thought, wow, that's awesome. I'm in manufacturing. This is a hospital system in Nebraska, and they want to replicate some of our structures and models, how we recruit and things like that in our plants. And then yesterday, I'm on a whole different call, different partners. This all manufacturing, but different businesses working on a grant. And 2 of the businesses are like, well, we're really new at this workplace literacy stuff. So we just kind of want to learn what you guys are doing and model off of it. I love it. And so it told me there's something about businesses are out there, they're wanting to engage, but they need a little bit of, connection. How do you do it? How does this work? We're ready to go in the venture. And it ties back to everything Jackie was saying about that connectivity and that alliance building in the public sector. And I'm so kind of just personally encouraged to see businesses leaping out at like that. But I think it's also groups like Behind Every Employer, our podcast here, our initiative, and these individuals that need to also kind of get on board to be that mentoring kind of guiding element to help businesses that are on the edge and wanting to get engaged. So my call to action is we need to really listen close to ways that we can build capacity with our business partners who really know very little about what we do sometimes in the public sector, but they want to get involved, and we need to really encourage them and make that as easy as possible for them.
That's awesome. Anson, it's been a pleasure. Jackie was an amazing guest. And Jackie, thank you for being on this show. Anson, it's always a pleasure. We're going to be back again. This is the very first episode. We're hoping to have a lot more to come. This is Behind Every Employer. It is sponsored by the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. And Anson, it's been a pleasure. And looking forward to the next episode. We'll see you soon.
Take it easy. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Behind Every Employer podcast with Anson Green and Jeffrey Abramowitz. This podcast is sponsored by the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. Check us out on coaid.org, on the COAID YouTube channel, on Spotify, Facebook, or Instagram.